Whoa. Man, if there was an episode that may just top Too Far Gone, Thank You might have done it. That was just insane, action packed. That was literally just a shocking episode. I still don't even know how to process it. I just finished watching it for a second time, and oh my goodness, that was crazy. Everybody, Derek here. I'm here to bring you this video. This will be my review for Thank You. That is the episode title. Name, of course, is Thank You, the phrase. If you are not caught up, if you did not watch this episode, if you do not want to be spoiled, I am warning you right now. Major spoilers ahead in this video. If you don't want to know what happened, turn off the video, watch the episode, and come back, because otherwise you will be majorly spoiled. Okay, so just to give an overall theme for what happened in the episode, mostly this episode dealt with the group trying to get back to Alexandria. The horn had been sounded, which we found out was the wolves doing. The truck with the wolf that fell on top of the horn and turned into a walker during the attack. And, of course, the group is wondering what's going on. So Rick is basically telling everybody except for Sasha, Abraham, and Daryl to get back to Alexandria, that is their goal. Now, of course, walkers are being diverted away from the herd because of the sound of the horn. So Rick is going to go and get the RV that was at one of the barrier spots and try to get the walkers to go back with Sasha, Abraham, and Daryl. And the rest of everybody else is going to go home to Alexandria. So that's the main thing that's going on throughout the episode. But I think that obviously, if you're still watching, I think you're going to want me to address the main thing that, is very shocking about this episode. And that is that we may have seen a major character death on the show. There is a very good chance that Glenn may have died in this episode. Although, I'm going to hold out faith, because something? You don't see his body. And the rule of television is, if you don't see the body, never assume. And even though there's a slim chance, I'm going to hold out hope that Glenn is still alive. And I'm going to explain exactly why leading up to this video. And I'm also going to make another video that I will post sometime early this week. It'll be under a different title. It won't be like why I think Glenn's not dead or why Glenn's alive, because I don't want to spoil people, at all, because obviously there may be some people that have not watched the episode. So it'll be under a different title, but I'm going to provide some actual, picture evidence of why I think Glenn is still alive based on this episode. So, as I said, we have a lot of different things going on in the episode. You have Rick, who, again, branched off on his own, and he spent the whole episode pretty much running towards the RV and to the RV. I mean, just full out running. He's a man on a mission. He needs to get to that RV, and he's going to do it. And during that part of the episode, Rick ends up coming across these few walkers. One of them has this big machete just, impaled through its brain and skull into its collarbone, and Rick goes to rip it out and cuts his hand open. So he's dealing with that throughout the episode. And he ends up getting to the RV, and he's getting ready to, drive it. He's trying to check in on everybody to see what's going on. He can't get a hold of Glenn, obviously. He can't get a hold of Tobin, but he does get a hold of Daryl and Sasha and Abraham, and they're still on track for the most part. But Daryl actually broke off from the group in this episode, and he was prepared to go back to Alexandria. They were only 5 miles out, and he asks, Sasha and Abraham, he's like, should we go back? And Abraham's like, no, we stick on the mission. 20 miles means 20 miles. But Daryl decides to break off and go back, which does not make Sasha or Abraham very happy with him. Although in the end, he does end up going back to them after, hearing about things that were going on. But, he did break off from them, and I think that might be something that he's going to have to deal with later, something that they're going to be very upset with him about. And Rick goes to start the RV, and we find out that those wolves that Morgan let go in the last episode were in the area, and they actually attack Rick inside of the RV. He kills two of them inside the RV, one of them being the one that Morgan was talking to, and then the other three are outside, and Rick grabs like his machine gun and just blasts them away, and he tries to start the RV again, and this time it's not starting, and of course this big, huge herd of walkers, which is probably the walkers that broke off from the herd originally, just start walking towards the RV, and that's when the episode cuts out. But that's pretty much like the smaller plots of the episode. The main part of the episode really focused on Michonne, Glenn, Heath, Nicholas, Scott, Annie. They were the other two people that were with Heath that went on the scavenger runs. And then a couple of background Alexandria characters. There was David, there was Sturgis, and there was Barnes. So either 7 or 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. So originally 9. And what ends up happening is they're running through the forest. They're trying to get back to Alexandria when they keep running into pockets full of walkers, in the woods, like there'd just be a little group. And they were dealing with this one group. Originally, Barnes gets bitten, and Michonne has to put him down. And at this point, Rick is getting ready to break off from the group. And Rick tells Michonne and Glenn, like, listen, try to get them back, try to get the Alexandria survivors back to the community. But if you can't and you have to leave them behind, then do it. Just get home. He wants to make sure that his people get home, which of course still shows the factions that are in this group. You see that people just are not, necessarily fully united yet. And I think that part of that's just because Rick still sees them as people who need help, who need, to be coddled in a sense, make sure that they, can get through this. Some of them are able to somewhat handle themselves, but not as well as, Rick, Michonne, and Glenn are. And they just haven't survived as long together, and that makes sense. Why there would be some distance. But Heath overhears this and is not very happy about it. But Michonne had to put Barnes down, and then Annie ends up slipping and falling and hurting either her ankle or her leg, so she's limping. And then Sturgis, the guy with the funny looking hat, he, when the walkers were attacking them in the woods, he pulls his gun and starts to shoot, and a walker ends up grabbing a hold of him, and his gun goes off, and it ends up wounding Scott in the leg, so Scott gets a leg injury. So they're really bogged down at this point. And then to top it all off, David gets bitten right on the back part of his shoulder. So he's bit, but, he can still operate and do stuff. So he sticks with them, although he knows he's going to die. And as they're walking along, David reveals that, he has a wife back at the community, Betsy, that he met. And it was a very nice story, but at the same time, you're like sad because this guy, has been bitten. He's going to die. And it makes you wonder, is Betsy alive? Did she die in the wolves attack? We don't know, because I don't think we've met her yet. So, we're getting a lot of these different, perceptions from the different Alexandria characters. And it is nice to get to know some of them, but it's also sad in the sense that, he's not going to be around. So they end up in a town. It's like a very small town with a couple of buildings and abandoned cars. And, their goal is to try to, first they want to find Sturgis, because Sturgis actually runs off. And they do actually end up finding his body. He was eaten by walkers. And throughout the episode, Nicholas starts to have like these, freeze moments, where he would get overcome with fear. And, sometimes your body your body's responses, it's either, fight, flight, or freeze. And he seemed to have those like freeze moments. And I think that a lot was coming back to him in that moment, because we actually find out that this is where Nicholas and Aiden went with a group of people, and those other four people died because Nicholas and Aiden left them behind. This was referenced back in Remember and Spend. They talked about that, and it turns out that this is where they died. And Nicholas actually finds the body as a walker, one of his team members named Will, and actually puts him down. So, a lot of different bad feelings coming back, which do haunt Nicholas throughout the episode. The group takes shelter inside of a pet store, and they have this plan. Nicholas and Glenn plan on going and setting a fire in one of the buildings that will distract the walkers, so that way they can hopefully distract the herd and get away, while the others are going to help out and try to get away as well. Michonne tries to talk Glenn out of it, but Glenn is persistent that this is his plan. He needs to do it, despite, Maggie being back in the community. And of course, they all realize that they could die because there's just this big, huge herd of walkers coming after them, that Glenn actually, gets the watch out, and you had people actually, preparing for that. David actually wrote a little note to Betsy so that somebody could give it to her if he would die. And Michonne and Heath, before they leave, do talk. They basically have a discussion about what Rick said, and Heath's not happy about that, which I can understand his perspective. It would almost be like being treated like, second-class citizens, like you're not important, that, that you're not held in esteem and equal to everybody else. And I can understand why that would obviously be upsetting. We experience things like that in our own lives, where, maybe we want to just be treated as equals, be treated like somebody's equal, but we may not be because of various different circumstances. And I think that he really felt like that, that when Rick said that he was just basically saying, well, these guys don't matter, so just, leave them behind. If they die, whatever. But Michonne, has a remark for that. She comes back strong, and you understand both sides, because you understand that Heath, just wants this group to stick together. He doesn't want to leave anybody behind, and that's admirable, and that's definitely something you want to do. But Michonne clarifies, like, look, Rick, myself, Glenn, the other people that came here, we've been out in the open longer than you have, and we've experienced more than you have. And she, like, compares it, that as far as we know, Heath's never had to kill people that, were trying to kill their friends, kind of like how the governor, Terminus, they've never had to deal with situations like that. They've never had to watch people die, never had to leave somebody behind. And, that makes sense, why you would say that to somebody, just say, look, in those moments, they need to do what they need to do to survive. And, I can understand both sides of the situation, because there really are moments in this episode where there's really just nothing that they could do. They tried their best, but just the circumstances did not prevail. And what ends up happening is the herd does catch up to them, and they end up having to flee. And as they're leaving, Annie ends up, again, because her leg was injured. I mean, she's not going to be able to make it. She falls down, and the walkers devour her. And then Michonne, Heath, Scott, and David make it to this big, huge fence, and they all try to help each other over. And David and Michonne, end up getting caught, and the walkers are pulling down on them. And, they're trying to save both of them. They're shooting walkers through the gate. Heath and Scott trying to save both of them. David ends up falling, and he gets eaten as well, but Michonne is able to make it over and survive. So the three of them, at this point, just have to continue on. They said Glenn basically tells them, he'll send them a signal to let them know that he's okay, that they just need to go. Well, Glenn and Nicholas end up getting cornered. They're on their own. They get cornered in this alley. There's this big, huge, gate with barbed wire up, and there's walkers on the other side of that, so even if they would jump over, they'd be jumping into a herd of walkers regardless. And Nicholas and Glenn both put up a very valiant fight. They're shooting, stabbing, trying to survive. They both get on top of the dumpster, and what ends up happening is Nicholas just panics. Unfortunately, he does not necessarily rise to the occasion. But on the other hand, I can also understand why he did what he did. Nicholas, ends up hearing you hear like these ringing going off in his ears. He's panicking. I mean, that's just the truth. And he realizes that at that point he believes that all is hopeless, and he ends up shooting himself in the head, killing himself. Now, what ends up happening though is his body ends up falling into Glenn's, and the two, end up falling down into the crowd of walkers. Nicholas's body though lands on top of Glenn's, and you just see like this massive, amount of blood just go pouring all over the place. Glenn screaming, and then you see like the camera pan back, and you just see the walkers continuing to devour, what's below them. Now, I have to say though, you do not see Glenn get bitten. That is something that I noted. That even though there's a lot of walkers, and even though the situation does look bleak, there is a very good chance that Glenn may still be alive. For one, Talking Dead did not put him in the in memoriam, I don't think. I quickly scrolled through it just before I did this because that might have affected the way I was thinking. I didn't see it, so I might be wrong. I might not be. But his name was not put up there, so that's a sign, although not necessarily always definitive. The other thing is, if you look at the situation, there's a very good chance that, Glenn could have crawled under something. I mean, there was a lot of rubble behind there. There was, like, the dumpster, I think, had enough room to crawl under. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another video specifically saying why I think Glenn survived, but also giving reasons why I think he might have died, because I think there is some significance with this whole entire scene that could go either way. But I want to make a separate video because obviously I'm running long on time here. So stay tuned for that. I will try to have it out by tomorrow so that way you guys can see it. So let me know what you think. I know this is definitely a very shocking episode, but I mean, that was definitely one of the most intense episodes that Walking Dead has created to date, and I think they did extraordinary despite how just, shocking and devastating it may have been, and definitely was. I mean, even if Glenn's alive, I mean, we lost Annie, we lost Nicholas, we lost a lot of background characters, and a lot of other characters are still in danger. There's just a lot of things going on in these 3 episodes that you just don't know what to think. Nothing is slowing down, and that's amazing for Walking Dead to do. Just amazing. But let me know what you guys think. Feel free to subscribe. I do have more videos coming, and if you have any suggestions for future videos that you want to see, don't be afraid to suggest them. Try to have a wonderful evening, everybody, and I think that next week is just going to be an extraordinary episode as well. And I want to thank everybody that's been watching my videos. Thank you for everything.